So Mark here from Rock and Load. This afternoon, I am joined by American country artist Sam Outlaw, who is coming to the UK this coming Thursday, St. Patrick's Day. Big shout out to my Irish brothers and sisters. Sam's doing a 9-date Whistle Stop UK tour, starting off at the Amira in London. Sam, how are you doing, sir?
Man, I'm doing so good. Thanks a lot for having me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So it's obviously the first time I've ever had the chance to talk to you. So
you have a beautiful speaking voice. I hope that I get to talk to you every time I put out new music.
Stop it, you. Stop it, you. You may get you. Well, you have to come to Ireland, obviously, first and foremost.
Isn't that crazy? I've never toured in Ireland.
Yeah.
And I don't understand what the disconnect is there. I know I've got folks that listen to music there. So maybe when I get back out that way in the fall, maybe we can add a show in Dublin or something. Because
definitely do.
To get to Ireland.
Yeah, there's a lot of country artists starting to appear on the Irish scene now.
I'm also obsessed with Enya. I just put out an Enya cover. Celtic music always it makes me cry immediately. So I want to go soak it in.
Yeah, it makes me cry for various reasons.
Yeah.
Well, sir, so listen, I was reading up in your bio earlier on. I believe you're originally from South Dakota.
Yeah, I was actually, it was funny. I was born in Aberdeen, South Dakota.
Yeah.
Originally, I remember like several years ago, someone said, I saw on your Wikipedia that you were born in Scotland. And I said, I don't think so. And sure enough, I went on there and said I was born in Aberdeen, United Kingdom. But no, I was born in the Midwest of the United States of America, Aberdeen, South Dakota. And my family moved to Southern California when I was 10 years old. So I kind of got Midwestern roots, but was mostly raised in California.
And what was South Dakota like to grow up in as a kid?
I was only there for a few years, but then we would go visit, like every summer. We'd go back to my grandma's farmhouse, and I would see all my uncles and aunts and cousins and everybody. And so for me, I guess I got the best of both worlds. I got to live in Southern California, which is gorgeous and great weather, and it's beautiful. And it was, the land of movies and stuff. I was obsessed with movies when I was a kid. And then I would get to go visit South Dakota during, like the 4th of July, and we would have fireworks, and we could just kind of run wild, because it's just like flat farmland. We'd get on little ATVs and tear it up, and just probably get into a lot of trouble. And fortunately, no one ever got hurt. But very thankful for my Midwestern roots. I think there's a work ethic there. My dad was one of 9 kids, grew up on a farm. His dad was a farmer. His dad's dad was a farmer. There's a work ethic there that you don't really see in a lot of other places. And my hope is that maybe God instilled some of that work ethic in me, but always have very much looked up to my Midwestern family.
Yeah. I was just looking at photographs earlier on because I wasn't too familiar with South Dakota. It looks like a stunning looking place. Really picturesque.
Yeah, it is. Most people know it for the Black Hills because of Mount Rushmore, where they got the 4 presidents, And there's also a part called the Badlands, which is also really gorgeous. This very kind of strange, almost desert-like land. But yeah, where I grew up, though, on the other side of the state, on the west side, or the east side of the state, we're talking just flat for as far as the eye can see.
Yeah.
So I don't know that a lot of people would classify that part as beautiful, but I think I kind of think there is something beautiful about it, just kind of the starkness of it. Also, though, I had the privilege of just kind of visiting and popping in and then going back home.
Yeah, I remember visiting, my partner's family in Ottawa. They lived out in Ottawa, and getting into a car and driving sort of towards Quebec, but literally driving for an hour and seeing nothing because it was just flatland. There's nothing to see.
Yeah, so it's crazy.
It's not like that in Ireland. You drive for an hour and you're literally off into the ocean in Ireland.
My dad has said before that when we first moved to Southern California, because of all the mountains and hills, that he felt very claustrophobic. Because he couldn't just see for 100 miles. So
yeah, the contrast. Yeah. And so, what was that like for you then? As just speaking of that, that must have been such a contrast for you from I suppose just the lifestyle.
Yeah, man. It was the day I turned 10 years old is when we got in the car to drive out to California from. We were actually living in a little town outside of Cleveland, Ohio at the time. I was so excited. Again, I was obsessed with movies. So even though we were moving to San Diego, which is 2.5 hours south of LA, I felt like we were moving to Hollywood. You know what I mean? Like for me, it was, I remember I for my birthday, I got rollerblades and got to our house in North County, San Diego, and was tearing it up around the sidewalks at my new neighborhood. But I would really credit with kind of the aesthetic of Southern California as just being a massive influence on my music. The themes that I write about, the imagery, when I first started playing out, I started calling my own particular genre SoCal country, because country music, or rather California country, was already taken. That was already a term that was used to kind of describe the Bakersfield sound. But obviously it was not in Bakersfield. I was when I first started playing out, I was just south of LA in Long Beach. So I think that again, the singer-songwriters of the 1970s, like James Taylor and Jackson Browne, Linda Ronstadt, I think all that kind of troubadour era music was a massive influence. Like my dad had, James Taylor's greatest hits and records by Bread and America. And so I think really everything in that LA country and country rock and folk rock sound really got into my blood. So not only did the visuals of Southern California make its way into my songwriting and into my aesthetic, but obviously the music as well.
And what age were you then looking to sort of translate that into performing or picking up an instrument?
I first picked up the guitar when I was probably 15 years old. I remember I learned the song American Pie by Don McLean, it's a great beginner song because it's got like all the chords in it. You got A minors, and you got an A7, you got like an E minor and a C and a D. So that was when I first picked it up. And I think right away I was just fascinated with melody writing. I still I make fun of my own lyrics all the time because I can see where I was like, I've got a good hook. Who cares what we're saying about it? That was when I first picked it up, and right away I started writing original songs. I was always friends with other musicians, and when it came time to graduate from college, I think I just thought that going into music was just too risky. And I was right.
Yeah.
I graduated, I worked kind of in the music industry and then got into advertising, and I did that for I guess 11 years after college before I finally made the very dubious decision to become a full-time touring musician. So music was an early obsession, and I guess just never really let me go.
Yeah, and so you were playing then, obviously, the local scene in LA, doing like smaller gigs like bars and stuff like that there. Yeah. And what is the country scene, or was that what you were playing generally, or was it just more sort of singer-songwriter?
Country music, or alt country or Americana, whatever you want to call it, it's kind of always been like a bit of a roller coaster in terms of its popularity in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Bands like Whiskey Town in the 90s, and there's been kind of this like it'll kind of become popular and not. When I first started playing out as Sam Outlaw, Outlaw is from my mother's maiden name.
Yeah.
So I used it for my stage name just because not only did it kind of have a country association, but it was also a family name. It was 2009 when I played my first show, and I remember I went to my local luthier string shop in Long Beach. It was called World of Strings, and I just walked in and basically said, "Does anyone know a pedal steel player?" And that was how I found my first steel player. So I put a band together. I was playing mostly original songs, some covers. But when I first started doing it, I mean, there was, as far as I knew in LA, there were I was not aware of any other bands that were doing country. Yeah. There was a lot of folk because there was that kind of wave of the Mumford and Sons folk popularity was kind of still cresting and still, having ripple effects in pop music. But there was not a lot of artists that had like an upright bass, a pedal steel guitar, wearing a Stetson, doing like original songs plus like George Jones covers. And then, of course, in the last 13 years since then, it's become a little bit more of a thing. But country music, it was never going to be a big thing in LA, I don't think. I think that when Buffalo Springfield and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young and Graham Parsons and all that stuff was, I think it probably peaked with like the Eagles, and then I don't know that it really ever had a big foothold in LA the way that it used to in the 70s, and probably never will. LA is always going to be a movie town, and then when it comes to music, it's still, I would say, more of a pop music and indie rock town than it is a country town. But the fans that do love it are, they're pretty loyal, and there's no lack of love for country music in LA. It's just not really like the go-to format.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so, where were you getting your own food from? Then musical food and inspiration? Was it just pulled off old records, or?
So the only country band I grew up listening to when I was a kid was this Western swing band called Asleep at the Wheel. Ray Benson started this Western swing revival group in the 70s. My dad, somehow, he was kind of a jazz head, but he fell in love with it probably because Western swing is, kind of has the jazz element. So I grew up with those records always playing, which is kind of like growing up with Bob Wills. So that's honestly the only country artist that I heard growing, because I wasn't listening to country music radio in the 80s and 90s. So I think that kind of set the soil for me to fall in love with it. And then it was in 2004, I was homesick from work, channel surfing, and I saw like country music television doing like top 100 country singers of all time or something. And I heard Emmylou Harris for the first time and George Jones. And I went out like a couple days later when I recovered, and I picked up a piece of the Sky by Emmylou Harris, and I picked up some George Jones like best of compilation. And then from there, it was like, I was just off to the races in terms of my obsession with country music. Yeah. So I think I can credit Asleep at the Wheel with kind of setting the soil. And then later, I just kind of got lucky and fell in love with it.
Yeah. And then like from 2009, obviously you're out doing your thing. 2015, you recorded your first album, but you went straight in there working with the likes of Ry Cooder. So how did that happen?
Yeah, that's still crazy. In 2014, well, first of all, I met Ry in 2013. I begged my buddy Matt Costa to let me open some shows for him. And so Matt let me be first of three on this tour. And the main support he had was a really talented singer-songwriter named Carly Ritter, who's actually Tex Ritter's granddaughter, and she's the daughter of the actor John Ritter from Three's Company. And she had this really great band for the tour. And the drummer for her band was Ry Cooder's son, Joaquin. So Joaquin had produced her record, and he was playing in her band and touring. And for the show in San Francisco, Ry just decided to come out and sit in on the show because he likes San Francisco. So I met Ry in 2013, very briefly. I'm sure he didn't remember me. And then fast forward to 2014, I have no idea who's going to produce my record, but I kind of wanted to start getting the musicians together. And I asked Joaquin Cooder if he would play drums for it. And he said, sure. And then after we did some rehearsing, he said, hey, are you still looking for a producer? And I said, yeah. He said, well, would you mind if I sent these rehearsal demos to Ry? I was like, well, what would Ry Cooder have to do with my little 3-minute pop songs, And he said, well, let's just do it. And so he sent Ry the demos, and next thing I know, I have this legendary guy playing on my record and producing it. And it was a really special experience that I'll always be grateful for.
Yeah. I always, whenever I'm talking to anybody at all that sort of involved working with these guys of that sort of level and stature, it must be an amazing educational experience as well.
It is. I mean, especially when I saw him produce the mariachi elements, where we brought in mariachis to play strings and horns and stuff. To see the way that he was able to kind of tackle those sessions without like a fully mapped out plan, but kind of on the fly, was able to, almost like a film director, kind of make something really special happen. That was really interesting. I think he also has a real, interestingly enough, kind of a casual sense about his own playing and about performing and about studio recordings. So it was cool to see someone who was a proper professional musician almost bring a sense of casualness. You'd think it would be the other way around, that it would make things maybe feel formal or something, but there was a real kind of casual excitement. And when Ry likes something, he really does light up, and it makes you feel special because you're part of it,
Yeah. And how did you like the studio experience, that whole thing of putting down a track or an album compared to sort of what you may have been used to, the live performance aspect?
Yeah. Two totally different beasts. The way that I do a song live is always different than the way I approach it in the studio. I really, being in the studio is probably my happiest place. I think because the possibilities are kind of limitless, and there's nothing more fun than just getting to create something with your friends. I mean, it really is kind of the ultimate. So, but yeah, I approach every song as its own song. I really don't try to say, okay, how can we make these 12 songs feel like a record? Which, maybe if I was better at that, I'd be more popular, more successful. But I really kind of approach every song by itself. And that experience, like all of my experiences in the studio, was very special, and you learn something every time. So you try to learn quickly.
Yeah, I'm sure you have to learn on your feet. And it was 2015, was it Angelino? Is that the correct pronunciation?
That's it, Angelino.
Yeah. And 2017, Tender Heart. how did you feel the progression between those two albums for yourself and the songwriting?
I mean, you could already hear a little bit in Angelina, but so much more in Tender Heart, kind of my love for soft rock, soft, whatever you want to call it, pop music, especially 80s pop. So I think in some ways, it was just even more of that kind of genre bending. Except with Tender Heart, the second record, it was more like, here's a country song, now here's a soft rock song, here's a country song. And I think I tried to, with my new album, Popular Mechanics, almost more, instead of being like one and then the other, one and then the other, more of a blend. So that I'm literally taking elements like, classic country music elements like the pedal steel and putting it in a song that has like 80s pop elements like an arpeggiator or a fretless bass or synthesizer. So it became more interesting to me each record to kind of challenge myself. How can I make something that shows the full kind of breadth of my influences?
Yeah. And then it was after that, the 2018, then you moved to Nashville.
That's right. Yeah.
How have you found the city of music?
And it's been really good to us. Not so much because of music. I mean, I didn't move to Nashville really for any music related reasons. But when my wife and I were living in LA and found out we were having a second baby, it was like, okay, we need to get out of this 2-bedroom apartment in Glendale and maybe find a house. So it really was just kind of like an affordability, quality of life thing. I wanted to be in a city that still had the amenities and the things that I was used to in Los Angeles, a proper international airport, good food, good bars, a nightlife. But I also wanted to be somewhere where I could buy a home and kind of start to put down some safer roots for my growing family.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the impetus for that decision. And so far, I think it was a good one.
And what's it like juggling family life with the life of a musician, being on the road and stuff?
Well, for the last 2 years, I haven't had to because no one's been allowed to tour. So,
yeah.
But if I was to look way back to 2019, the last time I did a full proper tour, I think for me, I've been kind of, after 2 straight years of touring starting in 2015, I was already kind of backing away from that lifestyle.
Yeah.
I think some people are good at doing that and kind of being able to be still a good father and a good husband and a good family man while also being on the road all the time. I don't know how to do that. I just don't. So starting in 2018, I cut my touring in less than a half. 2019, I think I only did, maybe like 50 shows the whole year or 40 shows. So going into 2020 with the lockdown, I was already kind of like, I had already kind of a little bit surrendered a big part of that.
Yeah.
Going into this new phase, I want to continue doing that. I do want to play shows. I'll do the occasional tour. I'll do the occasional weekend of shows, but I'm much more desiring to just be a dad and to be a husband and to be home and to be present for my kids to really know me.
Yeah, well, I think coming out of the back of the pandemic, an awful lot of people have learned to appreciate the life balance and the importance of that. So and how was your actual lockdown experience itself? How was the that time for you?
We did it with 2 little kids, so it was really hard, especially for me. I'm more of an extrovert. I'm a performer, so I like attention. Being stuck at home, the kids don't care about you. Your wife, she's seen you at your best and your worst and everything in between. So I will credit my wife with definitely being a huge kind of source of support and love during that time. Mentally, it was a challenge for me, so I think it gave me a good chance to kind of get my mental health into check. But yeah, I don't want to have to do it again. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
I'm also thankful. I think doing the lockdown in Nashville instead of being in Los Angeles was a good thing. We go back to visit California regularly, and whenever I was in LA or Southern California during the pandemic, it was somehow especially depressing. I don't know why. So I'm thankful for the community that we have here in Nashville. Very thankful.
Yeah. And was it the lockdown quite severe in Nashville, or were we able to?
It was pretty severe, man, especially for a town that makes all of its money on tourism and on live performances and on booze sales at bars.
Yeah.
So, here's what happened in 2020. East Nashville, where I live, got hit with a freaking tornado that killed some people and destroyed a bunch of homes. Then a second later, the lockdown happened. Then later that year on Christmas Day, there was a huge bomb set off in downtown. So it was a terribly challenging year in Nashville. And I know a lot of musicians that a lot of people had to, move back home, move in with their parents, go get a job at a hardware store or start driving Uber or Lyft to make ends meet. So I think that our family probably had it a lot easier than a lot of others. And I don't take that for granted, because I saw a lot of people suffer even worse than we did. So happy that it's over.
Yeah, it was. I keep forgetting. Actually, 2020 was one of the most bizarre years probably in world history. Never mind just the pandemic, but everything that was going on in the States with the Trump, the elections, and then the whole Black Lives Matter thing. So there was a massive political thing going on there as well. So challenging times.
Yeah. And I think for me, I really kind of try to, I guess, throttle my intake of the news, of social media. I think I realized that I'm much more interested in keeping my own family and my own self in a good place, because that's the only thing I can change anyway. I mean, you can stress and worry yourself all day long about what's happening out in the world, but I hope you spend a little bit of your time taking care of your own backyard.
Yeah, so important.
Yeah, I think for me, especially raising, two little boys, I want to instill in them a sense of just love for their fellow man, a sense of humility, and the ability to show grace for others, even when it looks like they might not be the most shining version of themselves. Yeah. So try to just have good conversations at home, and try to just be a place of love.
Yeah. And Nashville itself, then, as a city, obviously there's so much happening at any given time with the music scene. Sure. Are you able to get involved in that, or is it? I remember talking to a guy called Tyler Bryant. I'm not sure if you ever came across him, from Nashville, and he was saying he couldn't even get arrested in the city because there's just so much happening. It's hard.
And that's the thing. I think the music, especially in terms of press, unless you're one of the two people that are being talked about in the moment, especially for me, I'm a straight white guy. I'm an almost 40-year-old, father. The press aren't exactly, clamoring to tell my story, right? Yeah. I think that you kind of almost have to bifurcate the two things. Be in love with where you're at because of your own life, but don't be dependent on the excitement around your career to bolster your own sense of value. Yeah. I think that Nashville has so much to offer, but if you're coming to Nashville to see what you can get out of it, I wish you all the luck, and I hope that you get everything that you can, but it's probably not the best basket to put your eggs in, again, in terms of your own personal value as an artist. But I love it. I've had some of my best shows ever in Nashville. I got to make my record here. I've gotten to meet so many incredible, talented, beautiful people. Forever grateful. Forever grateful.
Yeah, I'd say it must be a bit like LA, where everybody goes to LA to be a movie star. I'm sure there's just like busloads of musicians landing in Nashville every day, hoping to make it, but getting their hearts broken at the same time.
Yeah, and that's a great comparison. I think it is very similar, and I think from as a little bit of an empathic artist type person myself, you can always kind of sense the sorrow out there, yeah. And I think for me, again, that's why even though I'm in Nashville, I don't really engage in the quote unquote scene too much. I kind of keep it at arm's length, and probably always will. I'm very, very thankful for my friends that are like doctors or dentists, and like that are anything other than musicians, because otherwise you just kind of feel like you're always at work or something.
Yeah, I can totally get it. Yeah. And speaking of the music industry, just as a wider thing, what do you think people should have an expectation of these days as far as what success means as a musician?
I mean, I would say whatever your expectations are, please lower them. But for me, I can only speak for myself. I've tried to gauge my own success on whether or not I like the song I've made, whether or not I like the show I just played. That's it. If you're in it for some sort of monetary milestone, or getting a certain amount of followers, or getting to people to care about you, you might get lucky and you might get those things. But for me, very quickly, I just knew I wasn't going to ever be really making music that was probably going to get played on the radio, or that was probably going to get me on, Good Morning America. So you have to find the joy really in and of the art itself. That's my own recommendation, is just trying to make songs that you like. Try to make stuff you're proud of, and then no one can ever take that away from you.
Yeah, and if you're lucky to be doing what you're doing, touring the world and making able to pay the rent, then you've got to sort of say, if you're working for yourself, that's got to be a successful result.
I think I really took that for granted early on, especially the pandemic has taught me to not take that for granted. Yeah. So I think I'm going into this UK tour again, first time touring in 2.5 years, with a deep sense of gratitude for anybody who will come to a show. If you are going to come to one of these shows, you are going to get the absolute best Sam Outlaw experience anybody's ever got, because I'm coming into it with a lot of gratefulness and excitement.
Yeah, absolutely. And in 2021, now you dropped your recent album, as you mentioned, Popular Mechanics, which is coming out. It's physical release just this month as well, isn't it? Has been released. Yeah. So there seemed to be a shift again in the musical style.
Yeah, big time.
It seems more energetic, and I can certainly get that sort of 80s pop vibe coming through in a couple of the tracks as well.
Yeah, man, I just have always loved 80s rock music. I have a brother who's almost 14 years older than me. So even though I was kind of like just a toddler for the most part in the 80s, I was exposed to a lot of that music through movies and through my older brother bringing 80s music home. So I think it's always been in the mix for me in terms of the things I love. And I also, again, I wanted to try to find a way to keep myself interested, if I was to just keep churning out kind of like the same music I was making in 2009, I just would be horribly bored with myself. Yeah. So Popular Mechanics, and it's also kind of it's a reference to the unsung heroes of music, which is the engineers and the people who are in there trying to figure out the technological ways to bring this songwriter's vision to life. So kind of my joke is, instead of making an Americana record, I want to make an arena-kana record, something a little bigger, something a little full, and good challenge for me. But I also was going to use my own voice. I wasn't going to try to parody like Steve Winwood or Phil Collins or Bryan Adams, these big soaring tenor rock singers. That's not the kind of singer I am. So I wanted to take in those influences, but also very much keep it a Sam Outlaw record.
Yeah. Because your first two albums were quite, I would say sedate. Like they're just quite a nice canter, where I can feel the pace and the energy levels, certainly with Popular Mechanics lifting.
Yeah, up the energy a lot, and that was very intentional.
Yeah, I'm sure. And regarding producing this one then, so who did you get involved, and what did they sort of pull out of you this time to make it bigger and better?
I started the record actually in Southern California with a guy named Kelly Winrich, who's, I think I mentioned, in a great band called Delta Spirit. And then we took some of those tracks from those sessions and kept them. But basically, I met this guy named Cheyenne Metters at the Grand Ole Opry when I was playing there. And Cheyenne and I hit it off. He had produced some music for Sarah Darling. And I met him at the Opry. I kind of told him my vision for making this record, and he already could kind of tell what I want to do. So the guy just did an incredible job. I mean, Cheyenne, he played a lot of the instruments on the record. We also did live tracking with, live band musicians, but I gave him this ridiculous laundry list of things. Like, okay, I want to do vocals like Enya, and I want to have this thing from Cyndi Lauper, and I want to do this thing from the Hornsby record. Oh, and I want to rip off this thing from Tom Petty. So I gave this guy so many kind of seemingly disjointed influence to try to work with. And he was really able to magically help me not only land the plane on the songs I'd started in 2018, but also write new songs and bring in a whole bunch of new songs to fill out the record. So I co-wrote 2 of the songs with Cheyenne. And yeah, his fingerprint is all over these tunes. The guy's an incredible, talented multi-instrumentalist. If it wasn't for Cheyenne Metters, this record wouldn't exist.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like that sort of mentality and that sort of thought process that producers have to put into it. They sort of deconstruct things and make it all happen.
That's right. Yeah.
And on the album as well, there's a female vocal for vocal melodies. Who's doing the vocals?
So on the first track, it's a song called "Here on a Mission," and that is Brandy Zidane. She's a local rock and roller here in Nashville, and I called her up. I was like, "Hey, I've got this kind of Tom Petty, Stevie Nicks style rock song. Would you sing it with me?" And she just crushed it. Other than that, I think what you're hearing for BGVs is probably Cheyenne using his falsetto voice. Because even some BGVs that we had recorded in Southern California, we retracked everything. So that's how good of a singer he is. He has this, I've told him he has almost this androgynous quality to his voice where it can sound like a male vocal or a female vocal. So what you're hearing probably is Cheyenne just being way too talented for his own good.
Yeah, fair play. And so like the tour is literally now within touching distance, just a few days away for you. You must be really excited about performing again.
Yeah, I'm so excited, man. I mean, a little bit nervous too because it's been so long.
Yeah.
But we've had some really great rehearsals here in Nashville. The musicians I bring with me are incredible. I've got Ruthie Collins opening the shows. She's from Nashville, really great country singer. So she's gonna be playing in the band and singing harmonies. Cheyenne's gonna be playing in the band and singing. We are pumped, man. We're just pumped.
Yeah. And do you find, or have you experienced in the past, what's it like playing to a European audience rather than the crowds back home?
Sure. Well, usually European shows are better. I mean, maybe because I'm more excited to be out there. I kind of like being a stranger in a strange land. I think it kind of gives me a certain kind of different energy than when I'm playing in the States. And some beautiful historic venues. I mean, I really get inspired. If I'm in LA, they would consider the Troubadour a historic venue, and that's that was built like 10 minutes ago. But when you're in England and when you're in parts of Scandinavia, and certainly if you're in Amsterdam or whatever, you're playing sometimes in buildings that are hundreds and hundreds of years old. So I think there's something very distinctly special about that experience. I just love culture. So it's probably more fun for me, to be honest. Yeah, it's just always a trip to me that anyone like that I write a song in my living room and then someone in like Gothenburg, Sweden is hearing it on the radio. That's just like,
Yeah,
it just blows my mind that that is even a possibility.
yeah. It's I think the digital age obviously has transformed things for a lot of musicians like yourself, especially the different genres, because it's so accessible now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
people discover things on playlists and they discover things because their friends sent it to them and they discover something on the radio. There's endless ways really to get at music now. And you get to the point where it's like, wow, it's kind of like with TV shows. There's so much out there. Where do you even start? So I'm thankful that somehow some people have found me.
I know, because as I say, even working on this side of the fence, my God, the amount of music I get
Oh,
sent every day, the amount of artists that I see are all fighting and vying for the same,
yeah,
obviously, sort of
yeah,
coverage.
same spot. Yeah,
How do people actually make it in this industry? I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, look, Sam, absolute pleasure talking to you.
Likewise.
And as I say, have to get your little ass across to Ireland at some stage.
Please, please, I would give anything to play in Ireland. I will put some feelers out there for the fall tour.
Yeah, I do indeed, man. There's, as I say, there's plenty of country artists appearing across the north and south of the border, because especially bouncing off the back of the Country to Country Festival, which just happened this weekend. So yeah, they're all planning their tour dates. You need to get involved.
I will, Sue.
Okay, dudes, look, thank you for your time again. And again, people, Sam lands in the UK this coming Thursday for a 9-date whistle stop tour, starting at the Mirror in London. Sam Outlaw.
Thank you so much.
No problem.